Welcome back. Bronx Rises Against Gun Violence aims to address the issue of gun violence and crime by supporting youth in high risk communities. B.R.A.G provides resources and opportunities to young people that allow them to see past neighborhood gun violence and envision a better future for themselves. Senior Vice President for Good Shepherd Services, David Caba, joins me to discuss their efforts. David, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Now, how did B.R.A.G begin under Good Shepherd Services?
So in 2014, the city decided to deploy the Cure Violence model here in New York City. Discretionary funds were offered to community-based organizations. Good Shepherd Services, at Good Shepherd, we have a slogan called "We See What Can Be." And when they saw this initiative to reduce gun violence in the communities that we serve, they couldn't wait to take a chance at doing that in our community. So we see what can be, we see peace, we see safety, we see prosperity in our communities. At that point in time, I was hired and recruited to build B.R.A.G from the ground up.
Now, the program works with several different organizations and community residents, which is always a plus when we're doing this type of work. Can you talk about the importance of some of these partnerships?
It's critical to have these partnerships. It can't just be B.R.A.G alone, Good Shepherd alone, fighting gun violence and other forms of violence in our communities. We need everyone. We need the residents, we need the business improvement district, we need faith-based, the other community-based organizations, our elected officials, law enforcement. Everyone plays a role, in particular the families and youth that we serve.
Now, as you mentioned, there's a focus on youth. Why did you want to prioritize this demographic, especially when we're talking about gun violence?
When you study this issue, the data basically suggests that individuals who are between the ages of 16 to 25-year-old are the most engaged in these high-risk activities. As a result, our program is designed for them to provide all the resources necessary for them to understand how to deal with conflict in a peaceful way.
Now, as someone who's, been doing this work, how have you seen gun violence affect communities like the Bronx?
It affects all sectors. Obviously, when someone gets shot, whether it's an infant, a youth, an elder, it has ripple effects. It could be the provider of the family, it could be the child of a family, it could be an elder. These have serious mental health issues when it comes to our communities and the impact that it has. It ranges in different areas. It can affect education, it could affect housing. It's critical that we attack this problem on a multi-pronged basis.
And I also want to add, just as like somebody who's from the Bronx and lived in New York City my entire life, it also affects people who maybe have nothing to do with gun violence. It really does affect the person who is holding the gun, and it changes the trajectory of their life, but it also affects maybe somebody who is also trying to be on the right path. So I think it's so amazing that your organization is really doing the work to address this issue. Now, I want to mention Cure Violence. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how it's an evidence-based anti-violence model?
Absolutely. The Cure Violence model was created in Chicago. It is a public health approach. In other words, violence behaves like a contagion. It spreads, it clusters, and you get infected. So the epidemiologist, Dr. Gary Sluggan, who created it, he looked at it from that point of view, realized that a cure was necessary, and the Cure Violence model was born. In essence, the cure of the credible messengers is to deploy that model in the community most impacted by gun violence. So it's designed to do three things. One is to detect and interrupt conflicts on the spot. We're talking about late at night, not usually when you're sleeping probably. And our teams are out there doing this work on a night in, night out basis. We do dozens of interruptions and mediations, de-escalations a night. Second one is to engage the youth that are involved in these high-risk activities, develop those relationships and move them in the right direction with a ton of resources. And the last one is to change community norms. Our communities, unfortunately, when you suffer decades of gun violence and other forms of violence, you think it's normal. And so we use a massive public education campaign, both print and social media, to drive the message home that this violence is not normal and needs to stop.
Now, as I mentioned earlier, I kind of give this idea of people who aren't even in this, who don't deal with guns can sometimes fall victim to this. And I want to mention that because of something called retaliatory violence. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you've seen with that, and how is your organization helping those affected by this community violence?
So most of the time when gun violence takes place, the natural thought is that, you know, these are young people who have arguments amongst each other, what they call beefs in the streets. And when one person gets injured, the other decides to retaliate, to return the favor, so to speak. But it also can mean, for example, if my child gets hurt, I'm going to be very upset at the individual that hurt my child, and I'm going to want something done. Unfortunately, sometimes this individual who's not really engaged in at-risk activities in the community will take things into their own hands. So we not only offer services to our young people that we serve, but all those affected as well.
Now, I want to talk about the leaders in B.R.A.G. The leaders have a very special connection with the community that they serve. Can you talk about the importance of having credible community members lead this mission?
It's the essence of what we do. We wouldn't be as effective as we are, and we've had a lot of success in the 10 years that we've been in the Bronx, deploying the Cure Violence model. Our credible messengers come from these very communities that we serve. They go through a very stringent vetting process, both traditional and non-traditional. Some things you'll be surprised to hear, and how we make sure that they're the right individual. They have to be suitable, not just credible. They come from these neighborhoods, probably still live there, know everyone in the neighborhood, the pastor, the bodega owner, all the young kids. The kids look up to them. They remember them when they were younger. They know the stories. Some of the stories are, you know, not to be proud of, but it's the makeup of the credible messengers that allows that deep impact in terms of connecting with our young people.
And just to kind of expand on that, when we say credible, this is somebody who has maybe lived this life, and they know, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but they know what it's like to kind of maybe turn the other page and kind of like get their life back on track. Can you expand on that a little bit more, what it means to be a credible, you know, leader in this organization?
Yeah, lived it, breathed it, exuded. Our credible messengers used to be that young person that unfortunately may have been carrying a weapon, may have been part of a street or violent street organization, who suffered the consequences. And those, you know, include being brought into a trauma ER because they suffered some injuries, unfortunately lost their freedom and ended up in institutions like prison. But then they decided to turn their lives around, because unfortunately we have seen many of our friends and family end up in the cemetery. And then that was the final lesson. No one wants to end in that plot that the family has to go visit. So they come back and turn their lives around. There's a ton of training behind this: violence interruption, program management implementation, mental health first aid, that they all go through before they can even start walking in our community and serving our community. So they're extremely impactful. They are the main ingredient behind the model that we use.
Now, can you talk about the criteria needed to join the program?
So basically, when we recruit you because we know every member in the community. We know individuals that used to be part of that lifestyle and turned things around. So credibility is at the highest. If you can't engage with the community members, then your success will probably be diminished. One of the things that we tend to do is we walk the community with the credible messenger, just to see if they know where the hotspots are, if they know who the different young people are that are engaged in high-risk activity, and what the connection to them is. Respect is a big deal for us, so when we're walking through that community, we're paying attention to how the community engages with this individual. Last but not least, we check social media. If you're promoting positivity, that's a box that's checked, and we know that you're in the right direction. Last is a hiring panel made of community members. So the interview involves, for example, you, Kibin, if you're a credible messenger, you'll be sitting in front of community members who remember when you were young, maybe causing them distress. And so now they get a chance to question you and see that you really turned your life around.
That's amazing. I love to hear that it really is a community effort. I think that's amazing, and it gives those people a chance to show that their community, that they've changed. So I think that's amazing. Now, because of the nature of the program, is outreach a challenge? And if so, how do you ever overcome those challenges?
It is a challenge, but we eat, sleep, and breathe. This is what we do. We were doing this before there was any funding associated to this. Many of us grew up in our neighborhoods, and encountered violence and stepped in because we knew that peace was the way to resolve issues. Someone being hurt doesn't resolve anything. All it does is foster that contagion that I talked about, which is violence that spreads in clusters and people get infected. So when it comes to outreach, we do it in a variety of ways. When we canvass, and we're talking about like 5 to 6 hours every night that we're canvassing up and down the hottest part of a precinct, for example, we're dishing out hundreds and hundreds of public education materials. Our posters are in the bodegas, in the liquor store, in the grocery store, in the supermarket. Our information, we have community events where we do rallies and marches. In fact, our peace barbecues are famous in the summer. Every third Saturday in June, July, and August, we have the B.R.A.G Peace Barbecues in the different parts of the Bronx that we're in, where we have a major celebration about the peace and safety that we've achieved in our communities.
What are some ways people can, and by people I mean maybe that could be local leaders or just other community residents, what are some ways people can help support this mission?
Whenever we do have events, particularly, for example, this evening we have a shooting response to the 2-year-old boy that was injured. So we need everyone to come out and support us. We need our elected leaders, we need community-based organizations, families, friends, anyone that has suffered this type of tragedy in their lifestyles, because the community needs to hear that this is not normal. We will not stand for that. You can also come visit us at our various locations. You can find us on Instagram at B.R.A.G_GSS. If you're a young person hearing this right now, please give us a call. We have a variety of resources for you, a boxing studio, a music recording studio. Please reach out to us.
And I just want to add that from what I'm hearing so far, it sounds like it is very much a judgment-free zone, and it gives people the chance to kind of show their community that they've changed and that they want to, make it a peaceful community. So I love just everything that I've heard so far and what the community is doing, and especially something that we need here in the Bronx. So I want to thank you so much for joining us and, just sharing a little bit about what your community is doing to help strengthen the Bronx.
Well, we're one with our community, so they know who we are. We still live there. I live in one of the precincts that we operate in, and so we're here to stay, and we look to expand.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
To learn more about the Good Shepherd Services program, B.R.A.G, please go to the website on the screen below. We've come to the end of our show today. I'd like to thank all of our guests for joining us and you, the viewers, for tuning in. If you missed any part of today's show, you can catch the recable cast at 5 and 10 p.m. on Optimum Channel 67 and Verizon Fios Channel 33, or watch anytime on the web at BronxNet.org. You can catch a brand new episode of Open with Darren Hemick on Wednesday and with Rena Valentine on Friday. I'm Kibin Alleyne, wishing you and yours safety and wellness now and always. See you next time.